Alright, so when you first launch Mirus, it'll automatically connect to the grain gauge, and you'll see that right here, H2 grain gauge, check mark. Conditional action right here. This is the auxiliary control for the diverter I was showing you out there. So you want that to be active for this ZURN. Other models of combines don't use that, so you wouldn't see that. The first thing you want to do is go into diagnostics right here. Now this page will kind of show you the health of the system and the current weights, and it'll allow you to manually move the gates back and forth just to make sure everything's working. So right now, with nothing in the bucket, maybe there is something in there showing a little bit of weight, 0.11. So you just select these tabs across the top to show you the health of the sensor. This information you don't need for daily operation. Most of this information is for troubleshooting. So if you called me with an issue about data, I might have you look in here and read me back some of these numbers if we need to troubleshoot, like a moisture level problem or whatever. What you can't see though is you can see your supply voltage. You got 13.7 volts coming off with the alternator running. If you won't lose data off the Mirus until it drops below like 11 volts. So as long as you're running normal there, you won't have any data issues.
What about the moisture probe temperature? Is that below freezing? Is it obsolete then? That's what I imagine.
It doesn't like being below 32 degrees. I've had people use it, and the system develops a little bit of its own heat. So usually when that becomes a problem is when it's hot. If it's over 100 degrees and you're having moisture reading issues, one thing I might ask you to check is that moisture temperature. But I don't see that very often. So under test weight, you'll see the chamber weight. So that's the weight of what's in the chamber. And then under actual weight, that's what's in the bucket. And the bucket is actually reading everything. It's reading the chamber weight as well, since the chamber's hanging from it, essentially. So what I would normally do if I saw that is I would do a tare and just zero it out. We know nothing's in there, so we're telling the bucket that we're at 0, so it'll reset itself to 0. Now, under actuators, here's where you have your individual gate control that you can kind of do a test before you get started, make sure everything's working. You can actually hear the gates out there moving. That's the separator, up and down. ZURN's isolation gate. DSP5 isn't used for anything. That must be activated or something, not sure what. ESP actuator 6, this is the auxiliary. This is that diverter gate out there on the elevator. Alright, now, before we do the weight calibration, we can have someone hang the small weight on the chamber.
Okay.
So you want to grab that small weight and hang it on that little bolt on the side of the chamber.
You want to grab that small weight and then that whole. So this is where just calibrating the.
So I know that weight is 2.95, so it's a little off and needs to be calibrated. You see it's 7. The bucket is a little closer, but that can be calibrated as well. You can remove the weight now.
You can pull that weight off.
Okay.
Alright. So we'll close this. Now I'll show you to get this set up and do the calibrations. And we'll do all the weights before we start any moisture curve building, because we're going to want the test weight, the chamber weight, and the plot to be accurate before we start working on that. So we'll press setup, and then H2 grain gauge. Now here you see several options. Once you go into the gauge, you can see data on each of the gates, and you can see the calibration of the slope of motion, bucket, and chamber. And down here in the bottom is your moisture curves. If you select that, this is what's stored on the system right now. And this is the last active, the check mark curve that they were using. Now if I hit the pencil right here, it'll go into the curve edit page of that specific curve, and it'll give you the saved data on that. So that's what someone created before with no inserts. These coefficients get calculated upon creating the curve. Now if you go into if you have a curve created this season, and you want to reuse the curve, you at least want to test it before you get started next season, and you can do that in this page. So let me go back. You enter curves, you pick the curve that you're using. So let's say highlight that on blue. I want to check it. Now in here you notice there's a cycle button. So you can actually take a sample of your grain, dump it in the bucket at this point, cycle it, and see how your data comes back compared to what your GAC reading was on that sample. You might be in a situation where you don't have 4 samples, so 3% spread, and maybe this data comes back and it was close, but you need to be recalibrated. So if you hit the recalibrate button, you can do a moisture adjust with just 1 sample, if you only had 1 sample available, and then retest it. We can get into that more of that once we get into building the curve. But let's start with the slope and motion right here. This calibrates the accelerometer on the system to compensate for any driving motion and stuff like that can affect weight on the load cells in the system. It'll isolate that and it won't be reflected in your data. So you want the system level at idle, which we are right now. You don't want it to be throttled up and shaking like crazy. Just like this is fine. And we'll hit start. And it'll just walk you through it. Ensure the grain gauge is on a level surface before beginning. Hit next. It's going to calibrate a still machine. If it had to make an adjustment, you'll see a change in the slope and motion voltage. So it made a little bit of an adjustment. So that means it needed to be done.
How do you know if you're on a perfect? You have to be a perfect level, or is like this slight slope here in this concrete enough? I mean,
That's fine.
okay.
Within reason.
If you're out in a field, like
If you're in the ditch and like this, then you're gonna want to, just keep yourself flat. All right, we'll do the bucket weight first. So you just select it, hit Open Calibration Wizard. I'm going to enter the amount that was stamped on the side of that weight. I know that one is 11.47. I'm going to hit next. It's going to say remove any extra weight from the bucket before continuing. video pop up with the tutorial, so you really can't get this wrong as long as you follow the steps it's telling you. So we need that big weight hung now on that left hanger by somebody out there.
Yep. That's big weight that's on the left side. I'd assume. There we go.
Ready?
Yep.
Okay. Now you can see the cell's working because the millivolt is higher than an empty. Alright, you can move it to the other side.
You can move it to the other side. Yep. There we go.
Good?
Yep.
Hit next. Alright, so it gave us new settings. You don't want to remove the weight just yet. You don't want to do that until it tells us. We'll hit next. Okay, it'll say go ahead and remove the weight. You want to do that before you press the check mark.
You can take the weight off. Yeah. Okay.
Alright, then we'll hit next. Alright, now we're done. Now we can move on to the test weight load cell calibration, was the chamber. We'll say open calibration wizard. Enter the weight.
There we go.
Our test weight is 2.95.
Gary, you go watch the next one, right? Is he bent over?
Go. Okay. We'll wait until the combine stops moving around. Just hit next. Continue. It's calibrating an empty chamber right now. Then it's going to ask us to hang the weight. So if someone can put that small weight on the center hook.
I'm gonna put that small weight on.
Did I work with you on another combine? No?
My first go here.
Okay. You look familiar. Where'd you work before this?
State of South Dakota.
Yes.
Not
South
no.
Dakota State?
No.
Okay.
No. I work for Game and Fish.
Okay. All right. We're ready to go?
Yep.
All right. Calibration complete. Coefficient did change. Yeah, okay, you can take the weight off.
You can take it off.
Okay. Okay. As soon as that's done, now I'll show you a shortcut to the diagnostics page so we can double check those weights. You just press this little gear right here, gear set. It'll bring up the diagnostics. Our bucket and our bucket, which is the weight, test weight, chamber should both say 0 now, which is good. Now I want to check them both. I would expect this one to be within 100 and this one to be spot on. So can they have someone hang the small weight on the center hook one more time?
You hang the small weight on the center again. Yep. There we go.
Okay, so 2.93, that's what I would expect for that weight. It's a little bit light for those load cells, but I would say that's accurate. 2.95 in the chamber weight, so that's spot on. All right, you can take that weight off.
You can take it off, yeah.
Okay, so now the part's done. To get to your harvest and start collecting data, we want to open a map. And before you can open a map, once you do that, it's going to ask you what moisture curve you want to use. So we need to have that moisture curve ready. So let's do that part. I'm going to select green gauge. We'll go down here. We'll say curves. And you see this little icon right down here is add a curve. So this is where you tell it whatever kind of, you'll want to name it. If you've got a naming convention that you already use for harvesting, you can use that. We recommend using a date and an insert count so you can keep track of those on the main page with where all the curves live. So which grain can we assume that you'll be harvesting first with this? Wheat?
Probably.
Okay. Alright, so let's go wheat. We'll call it wheat 24. 0. Insert. Alright, now there's two different types of moisture models you can use with the H2. You can use an EM2 or you can use an M20. And the difference is the M20 is kind of built-in curves for a reference that Harvest Master is already inserted into Mirrors, which gives you a starting point and better results in the end, usually. But it doesn't cover all grains. If you're going to be doing, sorghum or peas or something like that, we don't have models for that. But if you select M2, it'll ask you which grain are you using, and this is what selection you have right now for using that. So you could use wheat, corn, barley, or oats. Anything other than these, you would just pick EM2, and then it would just be raw data from your samples that is creating the curve off of. Okay?
So you can create the curve as you harvest?
Nope, it has to be done before you harvest.
Okay.
Yeah. You're just going to need, border plots to get those samples.
Sure.
If you don't have them stored.
Sure.
Now, if we did have one or two inserts in there, this is where we'd want to tell it, just by doing that. So the system knows. So just for purpose of this exercise, we'll select M2. We'll tell it it's wheat. And it's the same amount of steps, whether you pick, one model or the other.
So that means the canola, I have seen that the canola moisture curve is
Yeah.
already inbuilt here.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, there's a default.
So we don't need to clear.
You do need to calibrate, yes. You do need to calibrate it. Yeah. Just in the end, in theory, it'll give you a better, more accurate result. It doesn't always happen. You might do this model and then run some test samples in the end and say, okay, the M2 model isn't giving me the data I want, and you can start over and try the EM method. All right, so we'll hit next. Now, in theory, let's say we'll have 3 to 4 samples with us. We want something that's close to standard, 12 to 15%. A dry sample that's 10 or less, and then a wet sample to create an accurate curve. This is where we would enter. I would start with the middle of the road, so you only need test weight for your very first sample that you run through it to do the moisture curve build. Once we jump to the driest and the wettest samples during this process, it won't ask us for test weight anymore. It only needs that one time to reconcile the chamber volume with this grain. So we don't actually know. There's no data on that bag, right?
How much is sample?
Was there any data on that wheat there, Naz?
Do you have any data on that wheat? Like moisture or anything like that? No.
Okay. So let's guess. Let's say it's 12. It is wheat though, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. What's standard test weight at 12% for wheat? 60. Okay. We'll put in 60. Now, we can run a single sample through as many times as we want when doing this. The system is going to read what we're telling us and say, okay, this voltage is, you're telling us it's 12%. And after we do the several scans, it's just going to give you the averages. So, right now at this point, we're ready to dump the sample in there at the top of the bucket and have the catch pail ready.
We can dump that wheat in the top. What? So we can dump it in.
And once you're to this window, the gates are positioned properly for doing this, so you don't have to worry about losing the sample.
As long as they're not doing the whole time, then they'll work it out. Yes. I don't turn off all those here. Okay. Go to high oil.
And the sample size, how much seed we need to dump?
We need at least 5 pounds. I don't think that was 5 pounds.
It's not the 5 pound.
So it might not like it, but we'll go through the steps anyway.
Yeah, just for training purpose.
Yeah. Is he ready?
I think so. You good?
Yeah. Just make sure the catch pail isn't touching any part of the grain gauge, because it could affect the weight reading.
Catch pail isn't touching any part of the grain gauge.
Okay, so here we go. Run it. Okay, we're going to run that sample again, so if they can put it back through.
You can run it back through.
What?
You can put it back in again.
They might have to dump it back in the bag and then throw it. Yeah, their lid is kind of in the way.
Looks like it's something you want it.
All right. Okay.
Is it the sample weight? 3.97?
So it's telling us we have almost 4 pounds of sample. This is the moisture we told it the sample was. That's the test weight we told it was. Now,
One more time.
I would do this one more time, but for the sake of this training, I'm going to go
Okay.
next.
Never mind. Never mind.
Yeah.
Nope.
I'm going to go next.
Okay.
Now, this is where we'd put in our dry sample, like say we had a 9% or something. So I'm going to enter 9. That's all you got to do. Now you're ready to put the sample in there.
Dump it in again.
You dump it in again.
Good.
right, now it's important to note that we don't have to hit this next button again until we're totally done running all of the rest of our samples. We stay right on this page. We want to run the 9 back through. We can just hit last value and then dump it back in. Yep. Okay. There we go. Okay. Then again, I would do this sample 3 times, and then we'll go to our wettest. So we'll tell it it's maybe 16%, and then they can dump that sample in. Okay.
So we have to have known 3 different types of sample, different moisture, right?
Yes, at least 3% apart.
And each sample we need to run 3 times.
Yes, that's correct. Okay, running the wettest sample. Okay, we'll do this one more time, so I'll hit last value. 16%. Yep. We're probably really going to confuse this curve with this.
Yeah,
It's already saying, why is the voltage the same on this one? Doesn't make sense. Okay. Now, once you have all 3 or 4 samples gone through in this method, then you can hit next. It's going to process your curve. It'll give you coefficient numbers. Hit the check mark. And this is our new curve page right here. So there's the name, Wheat 24 0 inch. Before I do anything else, what I like to do is save it. Now back on your curves page, we'll be able to find it right there. We press edit, and now we can test it with this little cycle button down here. So all you gotta do is take any of your 3 or 4 samples you've been using, dump it in, cycle it, and see how the data comes back and make sure it's accurate. So let's go ahead and dump that sample in.
Just put it back in. Again.
Okay, let's see what it tells us. Alright, so it tells us it's 13.7. The actual weight in the chamber is 3.7 pounds. Test weight is 55. Gave us an offset number. Okay, so what you would want to do then in this situation is grab your driest sample, do the same thing, dump it in, cycle it, look at that data. If it matches, you're good to go. Then do the same thing with your wettest sample. Okay. If any one of those points comes back and it's 1.5% moisture off, then you can recalibrate that particular sample if you want to. And you would do that just with this button, recalibrate. Using one sample, you can pick that. And then it'll ask you for that, the sample that you thought was off, you can use to recalibrate that sample. So that's where you put the moisture, run it through 3 times, save it, and then do the scan again to see if it's improved.
So it will improve the same curve, the curve they're working with.
Yeah. All right, so once you're happy with it and save it, there's our curve. Once we go to build our map, you'll see the curve will be ready to be picked, to be used for that harvest. Any questions so far? Pretty easy.
Yep.
So, let's go back to main page. We'll go into maps. Okay. These are all the saved maps. You probably don't want all these. You can delete whatever you want just by checking the box and hitting the trash can. So whoever here manages that part, I'll let you do that. So let's go. We want to build a brand new map. We'll say new. We'll call this test 24.
Yeah, it opened.
It's wheat.
Right now it is getting hung up right out or beneath the cyclone or right up there somewhere.
Range row is the most common map layout that we use, especially for these H2 Classic models. The 4 row is for like a twin hopper, grain gauge. You can do standard plot ID if you want. If you want your plots to be named 100, 101, 102. You can do sub maps if you want, like a map within a map. But most common, like I said, is range row. I'll show you how that works. So if you highlight it, hit next. This is the default range in plots wide. So for the purposes of this training, I'll just move this to like a 6x3 so we can get it all spatial.
Our plots will use.
And then increments. And this is basically if you really want to super customize how your plot numbers are laid out, you can change increments, but it defaults just to 1. So range row would be, it's going to be 1, 1, and then 2, 1, 3, 1. All right. Now, test 24 is now in our maps list. You want to highlight it, and then when you press harvest, it's going to ask you your driving pattern. So, where are you going to be starting at the field? Your orientation, basically. So that's where you set this. And you can change this mid-flight too if you're in the map and you run across like a flooded area or something like that, you don't want to harvest it. You can use the navigation button to change which plot you're at when you start. I'll show you how to do that. So this is asking you what traits you want to collect during this harvest. Weight, moisture test weight is what it'll give you. You can build traits in advance if you want, like lodging or anything else. But there's other ways in the map to collect that data as well. So I don't see a lot of people using traits. So this is where it says, select the moisture curve that you want to use. So we want to pick the one that we just built.
Yeah.
It's already highlighted. So we can hit go. Then it's going to open the map screen. it's enabled harvest. Now, this is a default view of what the Harvest Master map looks like. You can customize the screen to however you want. You can move the window sizes around. You can change what data you're looking at in any of the windows. So you see how this is highlighted right here? This quad view is highlighted. If you press this, then it'll allow you to select what you want to see in each one of the windows. This is pretty standard, what we're seeing here. You'll see a single plot data. You'll see your plot and range list with the data showing up there. I see a lot of people change one of these to like real-time weight. So all you gotta do is select it and hit this again. And now, as you're driving through the plot, you'll actually see the bucket weight fill up. It'll go from 0 to 8 pounds, 10 pounds, whatever you're gonna get out of it. So if you start getting errors that your minimum weight threshold wasn't met in the chamber, you don't have enough grain in there for to give you accurate data, you'll be able to kind of see a reason. You'll see your real-time bucket weight only get to that amount. So that's something good to keep an eye on while you're harvesting. You do want to set your plot length and width, and you can do that by hitting this button right there, going to yield, and then hitting the gears, and that'll allow you to set your plot length and plot width. That's for just giving you accurate yield data in the end.
How accurate does that need to be set? Like we plant 30-foot plots, but you know by the time we plant and stuff, they might end up being 28 feet. Like will that difference?
No. Your moisture and your test weight will still be accurate. Your yield might fluctuate a little bit, but it's just to give you a ballpark what you're getting.
Sure.
So once you set this back to range and row, so that's what the spatial map will look like. So once you're ready to start driving, you position yourself at that plot 1-1 and hit start. Let's set that to countdown. So the idea is to, once you see this number and it's green, you can start driving through your first plot. You stop in the alley, then you hit the countdown timer, and that's when it's going to do the flush cycle. It's going to start, it's going to fill that chamber full of grain. It's going to take the measurement. The diverter gate is going to move out there to make sure all the grain gets out of the cyclone through our system, and it'll say go when it's ready and safe for you to start driving to the next plot.
8 minute or countdown 8? What does it mean?
That's 8 seconds.
Oh, 8 seconds.
Yes. So that's just a default number. You can adjust that by hitting the clock right here. So here's your countdown time.
Okay.
If your grain is moving through the system really quick, you can reduce that time to speed up your process, right? And it makes a huge difference depending on how many plots you have. If you have super wet grain, it's having trouble or slowing down going through there, then that's when you want to increase that time. So I see a lot of people running at 5, depending on what you're harvesting, but the default is 8. You need to hit this button every time you go through a plot. I think ZURN has one of these set up as the trigger.
So there is a trigger for flushing.
Yeah, so I think one of these buttons in the ZURN guy will show you.
Okay.
ZURN's planning on coming out here, right?
He's been out here.
He's been out here already?
Yeah.
Okay.
It is one of them.
So he probably showed somebody already
So
But-
that is for flushing, right?
for the cycle, yeah.
Cycle flushing, yeah.
I was gonna mention, you can actually float that button. This is more of a cute toy than anything else. You can float this. If you actually had to touch the screen all the time, people can move this start button around to make it easier to access. But by default, it's locked to that corner and you can just
Okay.
use this. Alright, so let's say we've gone through plot 1, range 1, with the countdown. It's going to cycle the grain. You'll hear the gates move. And once it's happy, it'll tell you to go. Now
So now
we can
to
start
this-
driving through the next plot.
Oh, so it will go automatically. Okay.
And once you get to the next alley,
Mm-hmm.
you can get the countdown timer again.
Again, okay. So whenever, say you are in between harvesting, so you can pause there and start the next harvest from the same plot, or
Like if you wanted to come back tomorrow.
yeah.
Yep. All you got to do is, I'll show you how to do that. So you'll see your data for each range row popping up
Uh-huh.
here,
Uh-huh.
and you can change the way you view this.
Mm-hmm.
Like I mentioned,
Mm-hmm.
customize it however you want. But to answer your question, yes, if we wanted to stop right here and go back to the main page, let's do it. You want to edit? You want to return the main menu? Yes. So it'll say right here. The next day you come back, you want to resume the map.
Okay.
Get yourself back in that same position you were in. You just hit resume. It'll load up the map.
At the same the plot where I was going.
Yep.
Right?
So you're back in the same alley you left,
Oh,
and it'll put you right back.
oh, that's good.
Now, what I mentioned before about navigating the map, if you got to plot 3 or 4 and there's nothing there, or you wanted to change positions on the, maybe go up to this corner and go back the other way, all you got to do that is hit this compass right here. Now you want to just pick the plot you want to go to next and
Oh,
highlight it.
then I can start
Then
from-
obviously you need to select your driving orientation at that point, your navigation type. You're not going to be going that way, right? So we're going to be going south. And which corner we're at? We're top right. So we would want to do that. And then hit next. And then you see it positioned us there. So since we correctly set the navigation now from that point, if we hit start, it's going to save the data for 5.3 and then jump to 4.3. Now, I mentioned before notes, so if you wanted to mention a note about a certain range row that you're in, you can press this pencil right there, and now you can put whatever information you want in there about that particular plot if you notice something that you want to save, and then that'll live on your exported file.
So after harvesting, then the data will save in the same file I created, right?
Yes. Yep.
And how can I take this data out?
So I'll show you how to export that. So let's say that we're done with this map. We'll go back to the main page. We'll go into our map list. Select the map that you're just working on.
Yes, 24.
Now, there's two views to export. You can export the CSV data file, which show your data for all your range and rows, and then there's also a heat map that you can export to show like the performance of that field. So I'll show you how to do both. So it's real simple. All you got to do is highlight your map, hit the export button here, and then if you turn advanced on, you can tell it what data you want to pin to your file. Not everybody wants everything. The main things are weight, moisture, and test weight. But if you wanted to add bulk density, chamber weight, some of these things would be for troubleshooting. Then this is where you select that information. And then you hit browse. And then you tell it a place to save. I'm just going to save it to the desktop of this tablet. Hit the check mark, and it says export file was saved. So if you open it,
Oh, okay.
that's what the data would look like.
Oh, that's nice. Is it all about the harvest, or you have more information?
What's that?
Like, is it all about the harvest, or you have more information?
That's just the harvest data. Now, if you want to see the heat map, close this out. If you select view here and the export button, well, let's do this. If you select each one of these traits, it'll show you the value of those. So if you wanted an overall view of your map to see which areas outperformed others, you can hit the export button here and tell it which traits you want it to include. Browse to a place to save. We'll tell this test one.
I had my training yesterday. I just have a question.
Sure. Save. Okay, and this is what the heat map would look like. I don't know if you'd ever use that feature, but that's how you do it.